first snow, and then I get snow tires. And then once I put them on, there's no snow. And then when I take them off, inevitably it snows. So this time I did a rain dance, thinking that I wouldn't get any rain, and it worked. So that's what I'll do. I couldn't do anything about the humidity, though. Okay, well, I thank you all for coming. I promised myself that I wouldn't say anything negative about my father. So, who's next? Sorry. And I'm going to try to read this because otherwise I'll do a Trump thing and start rambling. In many ways, my father was an enigma to me, as he was to many of you here. But I also know he was a positive influence on many of his friends and students, and loved by many who were entertained by his piano playing. Of course, that's not all he is remembered for, and so I've invited a number of his friends, who I'm sure will speak to some of that. My sister Deborah, at some point, started calling our father Grumpy Gramps, because, you know, he was grumpy. And I believe I was the one who then nicknamed him Gigi, and referred to him as Gigi whenever we texted with each other, my French family. So henceforth, I'll refer to him as Gigi. I do have some happy memories of Gigi, mostly from my early childhood, but they had a profound and lasting effect on my life. In the beginning, we lived with Gigi's parents in a small apartment in Brooklyn. I have few memories of that time. I have a few memories of that time. One being when I fell face down, hurting my nose while Gigi played the piano. That was the beginning of my love-hate relationship with the piano. Strange. After my mother couldn't stand living with my grandparents anymore, we moved to a 4-story apartment. I think it was 4 or 3-story apartment, also in Brooklyn. And I remember watching the Steinway piano moved into our apartment with a crane through the window. You know, there was no elevator, and that's how they did it. And they still do it now. Just like those old Laurel and Hardy movies, you know, where the piano falls down and hits somebody or whatever. Anyway, the piano made it safely, and it's the one that I now own and practice and play on. After my mother, of course, music was always what I remember most. The only music I recall at that time was a song Gigi played called Mama Look a Boo Boo Day. Maybe some of you have heard it. It's a silly calypso song made popular by Harry Belafonte. And it made me laugh so hard, I would always ask him to play it, and then of course he would, and I would just start laughing. And it wasn't until we moved to Queens when I was 5 that I remember Gigi playing the Schubert Impromptu No. 2 in E-flat major, and also Chopin's Ballade No. 2 in F major. 2 composers dear to my heart, and that I love to play today. I also remember listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, performed by Bruno Walter, and I still remember the black LP cover. I used to listen to the entire first movement in my head while playing stickball with my friends. It might explain why I love Beethoven, but was a mediocre ball player. Another was Eric Leinsdorf's recording of Wagner's Die Walküre, sung by Birgit Nilsson and Jan Vickers. It was a red-covered LP, and it's still my favorite recording. I just found it on Apple Music. It's amazing. And it just brought back so many memories of that time. Finally, there's Disney's Pinocchio, which includes such memorable tunes as When You Wish Upon a Star and Give a Little Whistle, sung by none other than Jiminy Cricket. Disney has yet to create anything half as good. There are also non-musical memories of Gigi that stand out. When I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, Gigi took me out of class to get lunch. I had no idea what was going on, just he came and I went. We went to a deli and got hot pastrami sandwiches, my favorite when we were still carnivores. I also remember Gigi taking me to work with him when he was recording a pop song. I was in the recording booth and 2 guys were talking about Gigi, saying he was the best in the business. And at the time I thought he was, and he probably was. When I was 10, we moved a mile south of here, away from my friends and relatives, away from my piano teacher that I feared, and the piano lessons that I dreaded. But growing up in the Finger Lakes was a real joy. The lakes, woods, waterfalls, and especially the cows. My sister and I were just amazed driving upstate and seeing real cows, you know. The ones that made milk, and of course the black and white ones that made chocolate milk. But these were real gifts from Gigi. It was in these boondocks that I had the opportunity to deepen my love for great music. I'm grateful for living in the environment with great classical music that Gigi played on the record player. Chopin, Schubert, Puccini, Wagner, Mahler, Beethoven, and many others. It was also through Gigi that I got to meet truly great beings that had and continues to have a lasting meaning in my life, most notably Paul Brunton and Anthony Damiani. On a more serious note, there were 3 items in which I was mentored by Gigi. I'll mention these 3 not in any particular order because they are a trinity of sorts. I developed the refined discrimination of knowing and savoring a perfect pizza, not to be found outside of New York City. To define it further is to degrade the memory.
Didn't hear that one. To keep the microphone close.
Louder.
I didn't say anything. What, the pizza? You didn't hear the pizza?
Say it again.
We just want another
Speak it to
slide.
the mic, Maestro.
I was mentored by Gigi on really knowing and savoring a really good pizza that you cannot find anywhere outside of New York City. Probably the water. Anyway, nothing here compares to it. There's also the bagel. I speak not of the blueberry, cinnamon, or God forbid, chocolate chip bagel. There's only the sesame, poppy, or onion bagel. Right, Dickie? Yeah. Baked completely on all surfaces. And I say that because you go to Wegmans or Ithaca Bakery, I hope nobody works there. They bake one side and the other side is raw. It's just not right. And I've complained, but they don't believe it. You can't toast an uncooked bagel. It doesn't work. It's not cooked. So, it has to be baked completely on all surfaces with a thick crust and a flavor, again, only to be made with New York City water. Finally, there is the kosher dill pickle, the half sour, not to be confused with those so-called dill pickles made with vinegar, but made with simple, pure ingredients, pickling cucumbers, salt, garlic, dill, and water, again, preferably from New York. Regarding kosher dill pickles, I need to relate one negative story about Gigi. When I eat a sandwich accompanied by a dill pickle, I always save the last bite for the pickle. One day, I was carrying a sandwich with the necessary accompaniment of a dill pickle when Gigi walked by me and, like a bird of prey, swiped the pickle with its nimble piano fingers and ate it. This has scarred me ever since. And it's the main reason I don't like to share the food on my plate. I now hand over the mic to Gigi's brother, my Uncle Stanley.
Nice coming here and meeting everybody. My pleasure. Thank you. Anyway, you hear me?
Raise the mic. Raise the mic.
There
you go.
Okay. My big brother Bert. Bert was 4 years older than me. Our family lived in Brooklyn, New York. When he was 9, I was 5. We were on our own after school, as both our parents had to work. Bert was trusted with the key to the apartment, and I was left at his mercy. Avenue U, Brooklyn was a tough neighborhood, and I frequently had altercations with the other kids who called on their older brothers for retaliation, and I could always count on my big brother Bert for help. Bert was a fabulous pianist, and an annual recital held by his piano teacher. When he was 16, he played Franz Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody without sheet music and received a lengthy standing ovation from the audience. In 1950, Bert passed up a lucrative summer job to play with a band in an upscale resort in order to play with me in a trio, saxophone, piano, and drums at a less paying job in Catskill, New York. He attended the famous Juilliard School of Music after high school and was interrupted by being drafted into the Army during the Korean War. He was stationed in Japan where he met and married his lovely wife, Terry. Coming back home with Terry, he continued his music education at Juilliard. After graduation, he continued to get his master's degree from Columbia University in New York. In 1955, Bert and Terry were blessed with the arrival of son Michael. Another happy event came with a later arrival of Deborah. Michael, as you know, became an outstanding concert pianist and headed a chamber orchestra here in the Finger Lakes. He now teaches piano at Binghamton University. Deborah, talented ballerina in New York, Chelsea, danced with the New York Telsa Ballet Company, and later became a well-known European choreographer. My brother enjoyed the love of Deborah's 2 daughters and his granddaughters, Raphael and Minna. Raphael and her husband, Yvonne Andriana, blessed Bert and Terry with 2 great-grandchildren, Isaac and Sasha. Bert was predeceased by his wife Terry. You all know Bert's dedication to teaching music in Watkins Glen's public schools and his love for this center, the Wisdom's Goldenrod. We are proud of my brother's contribution to family and his community. God bless you, big brother.
Lou DeSarno.
Well, these are tough acts to follow, but I'll try. So, Bert Salmirs came to Watkins High, as Stanley mentioned, in 1966, and I was a junior. So when I first heard him talk, his diction and his delivery was so different from anybody else I'd ever heard talk in Schuyler County. So right away I thought, this guy's a cool guy. So then I would hear him playing the piano, because he was the music teacher and he had a piano in his room. And I was very enthusiastic about meeting him and getting to know him. So shortly after he was there, he was not my actual music teacher, but he was a study hall teacher that I would have a couple times a week. And in one of the study halls, after maybe a few months of him being there, I noticed him reading an old book, and he was pretty intensely studying it. And so I said, Mr. Salmirs, what's that text you're reading? And he said, oh, it's just a philosophy text. And I said, well, what's it dealing with? And he said, oh, how you see a tree. And I said, Bert, are you serious? You're studying this text with a certain amount of intensity, and it's about how to see a tree? And he says, yeah. He said, actually, Lou, it might be a little bit more complicated than you ever imagined. So he said, someday maybe you'd like to look into this kind of thing. And I said, maybe I would. So time went on, and we had more conversations. Other students had conversations like that with him. And several months later, he proposed to myself and a few friends that we start a club, a philosophy club. And he said, well, we got to title it right. And so I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, we're going to call it the Fine Arts Club. And I said, the Fine Arts Club? And that's going to be talking about philosophy? And he said, yeah, we don't want to upset anybody. We don't want to upset anybody. The administration, parents, teachers, we don't want them to know what we're studying. I thought, this guy is so amazing. So the first text we got into was Plato's Symposium, which is a lot about love, right? All these guys had to give a talk about love. And so it was an amazing class. And then we went on, after doing a little Plato, we did the Bhagavad Gita. Now this is 1966, 67, okay? So, and then at the same time, he was introducing me and us, my friends, to Hermann Hesse's books like Siddhartha, Magister Ludi, Journey to the East, all the Hesse books. So he was really kind of hooking us into this whole quest thing. I'm sorry. So anyway, we got hooked. And toward the end of that year, when he started that club, he said, I'm going to bring a guest in with me. He's a Sanskrit reader, and I think you'll find him interesting. So it's probably in the spring of 67, and so he brings this guy in, and I'm looking at this guy as he's walking through the door, and he's got a through-way shirt on with his name printed across the front, Tony. And he was obviously not shaven for several days. And I'm thinking, this guy's a Sanskrit scholar. So anyway, he didn't say a word. He didn't say a word for the whole. He said, you guys go ahead and talk. So we were talking about the Bhagavad Gita. And at the end of the class, Bert said, I want everyone to come up. I want you to meet Anthony Damiani. So all this time, Anthony had never said a word. And so we got up, and we all shook hands, said hello. And after he met everybody, he said, I want to say something to you, all of you here. He said, this is what you should be using your mind for, not trying to get to the moon. So, I mean, when I heard him talk, that was like the most amazing. No, I thought, I've got to be around this guy. But of course, there were many months, maybe a year or so, before I could get to the bookstore. The American Brahmin bookstore open. So anyway, and then Bert was having people over at his house occasionally, because they were starting astrology classes at the house. So anyway, I got to go to those, and so this guy Bert Salmirs was just, and then to hear him play a piano, I had never heard anyone live play a piano like Bert Salmirs. And he could play, as most of you here know, he could play jazz, pop, classical, operatic stuff. And he was just so amazing, and he had so much energy. One more story. Bert came as the music teacher, and he was younger than the old, the senior music teacher who had the chorus, the senior chorus. And Bert always wanted to get the senior chorus because he just wanted to direct it, but he never got there. So all he could ever direct was this junior high chorus. Now during the Lenten concert at Watkins High, Bert brought the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade class out to do the Lenten concert. And when those kids came on stage and he started, I forgot all the music they were playing, but they were so energized by Bert's conducting. It was an amazing concert. Then the senior chorus came up, and it was like very dull. There was no comparison, and he got such energy from those kids. It was quite an amazing event. But anyway, after all of this, I wanted to say that Bert was my bridge to this place. And that all happened from '66, starting in '66, until now. And finally, you know, after the American Brahmin Bookstore, this place was born, and it's now 59 years later that we're here. Thank you.
Steve here?
As long as I'm able to stand. I probably know Bert longer than anybody here.
Okay, you're right, Steve.
Okay.
You gotta be really close to it.
I probably, how's that? How's that?
Whoa.
That close?
Yeah, hold it closer than you think.
Hi. I probably know Bert longer than anybody here except for his brother. I first met Bert when I was maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. He came to the house. We lived in this old bungalow in Coney Island. And he tells me this story about how we got there. He was playing at a restaurant called Billy Joe's, which was down the block. It was a big sort of a celebration venue place. And my father was waiting there. My father being Anthony, as you all know. So as they're playing the Bert Sal Trio, this is the first incarnation of the Bert Sal Trio, my father turns around to him, he says, "Can you guys play any real music?" So that was how they got introduced. So then, after they close out, he brings them over to the house, which we lived on, it was just a half a block away. They come over to the house, and they start playing music. My father, we had a piano, and one of the guys played a violin, one of the guys played a clarinet. Their names were Jerry and Vince and Bert. And this went on for, I don't know how long, because I was too young to remember all of this stuff. But I have this one image of this one night when they're playing, and all I hear is music coming out of the room, and smoke. And smoke. I didn't see anything. Because, of course, back in those days, everybody smoked. That was my first encounter, first meeting with Bert. Even though I've known Bert so long, I really don't know Bert. I can't say that we ever had a heart-to-heart talk, although we've had many talks over the years. And at the American Brahmin Bookstore on Friday nights, he was playing at that time the College Spa. And so after class, Lori and I and a bunch of other people from the group, would go down and listen to Bert. And that's kind of a really fond memory. Well, and when I was, I guess maybe 12 or so, I had to take piano lessons. My father wanted me to be a pianist. And of course, Bert was my piano teacher for 2 or 3 years. And I hated it. I just absolutely hated it. Here I am, sitting with this front row with the big windows and stuff, and I'm being given piano lessons, and my friends are out there playing ball. I said, I don't want to do this. It took Bert almost 3 years to convince my father that I was never going to be a pianist. So after a while, when Bert saw I'm not really practicing. I didn't know one note from another most of the time. He started playing some of his tunes. He was telling me, talk to me about some of the music that he had written for pop music at the time, and he wrote a couple of hits. So he would play them for me, and we'd talk about that. And that was like my piano lessons. But it evolved into that. And another time later on, I remember seeing him at in Corning. He played at the country club in Corning. And I remember one night, Laurie and I and Kenneth Hurst went there to see him. And we had dinner and we were hanging out. And he was putting on a show, I says, and I never knew that side of him that well. I mean, I was really impressed. I says, this guy should be really, he should be on television. I mean, he was really good. And all the years we've had, well, a lot of conversations, but most of the time when he talked to me, it was always about how he met Anthony and how, basically how in love he was with Anthony, and that Anthony opened up a whole new world to him. No, it was always about Anthony. So I never really heard about Bert. I heard about Bert and Anthony. That was kind of like the extent of our relationship. I had a much closer relationship with Terry than I did with Bert, partially because I worked with her for many years at Digicom. But I kind of I feel like I never really knew Bert. He was, as Michael said, he was an enigma to me, anyways. But I always appreciated the fact that he always seemed like a gentle person to me, kind, gentle person. He never yelled at me during our lessons. I mean, he was a little stern sometimes because I was really a screw-up at the time. But he was never nasty or anything. You know, I don't know if he had a nasty bone. If he did, I never saw it. I'm sure Michael would disagree with me. But you know, these last couple of years, I had very little contact with him, but I kind of miss seeing him now and then. Anyway, it was, for me, it's like almost my whole life. You know, from 5 years, I guess I was, I don't know, 5 years old or something. It's my childhood. The only other person I know that long is my brother. Well, ancient history. But thank you.
Thank you.
All yours, Mark.
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Andrew Holmes. For those who don't know me. And I've known Bert since about 1969, 1970, because we worked together at the Watkins Glen school system. We were in different buildings, but we often saw each other at teachers' conferences and like that. And I enjoyed his music at a place called Lodge on the Green, which was a nightclub over in Painted Post. We used to go there and he would play, and I was always amazed that somebody would just holler out the name of a song and Bert would just play it flat out, no music, just do it. And sometimes he'd sing it too, you know. But I don't want to talk about Bert's music. We all know about that. I want to talk a little bit about a part of Bert that most people didn't experience.
So in the old days, you know, we were building a lot of stuff over here. And one day Bert asked me if we could have coffee together and talk to me privately. I couldn't imagine what it was about because, you know, we were good friends and we thought a lot of each other, and he was always concerned about my welfare in our professional life. Well, what he wanted to talk about was his interest in helping with projects here. He wanted to do some physical work. And he wanted me to assign him a job and maybe teach him to do something. Well, at that time, we were building what is now referred to lovingly as the annex, which was, it's a wooden house, just a house made out of boards and stuff. And we were building it for an older lady named Ahud Ibor. And she had very specific instructions. She wanted all spruce wood. And it was nothing conventional. Everything was wood and done differently. So I said, well, Bert, really the only thing I could do at this stage was maybe I could show you how to do some of the trim work. He's great. He says, teach me to do the trim work. I said, yeah, but you got to work your fingers real close to several dangerous tools. You might cut your fingers off. You know, you need all 10 to play the piano. You don't know, I'll be careful, I want to do it. So I run a little industrial arts program with Bert for a couple of weeks, showed him how to do trim. It's hard, it was hard to do. And I think there's an insight into Bert's personality and his nature, because he was able to do the trim work very, very well, very precisely. Once he learned how to do it, he became jealous of other people doing it. He didn't want anybody else to do it. He'd do it himself, and he did a beautiful job, which involved cutting and fitting and joining the boards, putting things together, setting the nails properly. And Louis and I and a few other people who were building here were amazed at the personality transformation in Bert. He really got into it. I mean, he was way into the idea of doing physical work. He loved it. It was great. He was one of the guys. I think it was something that Bert had not done before. But anyway, we had a great time, and he did wonderful trim work. And Bert was a big part of my adult life since the late 60s and early 70s. I saw him just about every day that I was living around here and at the center. And he was a true gentleman. And he's greatly missed. Bert was everyone's friend, never a harsh word. I miss him. Thank you.
Okay. I have to eat it, Jane told me, right? Right. Okay, so I think the first time I really met Bert, I was arriving in Switzerland, Christmas morning. It was 1973, maybe? And I didn't know where I was going. I had just gotten off the train. It was German Switzerland, and I just had a name of a hotel, and I had no idea where I was going, and I had my rucksack on, as it was called. And I somehow wandered to the hotel, and Bert was, actually the whole Salmirs family was there except Deborah, and a couple other people. And they're like, well, what are you doing here? But suddenly Bert took over, and he kind of became my caretaker. And he would always refer to me as the girl with the rucksack. And I looked pretty, I was pretty hippie, bedraggled. But anyway, he took me in anyway, took care of me, made sure that I knew where I was going. And that became sort of a protector, mentor through the years. So I was invited to a lot of Christmases, Thanksgivings, celebrations at the Salmirs, and it was always really wonderful. I think I was kind of a cousin of some sort. And also I had studied piano, and so he would give me these kind of unofficial piano lessons when I was working on a piece, and I didn't understand something, and he would say, well, come on over and, play it for me. And then we would spend, hours, and he would be very excited, and so I got so much out of that time with him. I wrote down a couple of things because, of course, I had no idea what I was going to say. The other thing was that I think he was always a little bit afraid to see me because I was going to always ask him to do something. Like, play for this and play for that. And he'd say, oh, okay, what is it now? Always said yes. He played for the Lake Country Players. He got conned into that for a couple of years. He played at various parties and events, and he'd always be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So there was this kind of real enthusiasm about participating in community and feeling important, and it was really kind of amazing to see. The other thing that he had this incredible gratitude towards people who helped him, especially when Terry was sick. I remember I would go over there and I would bring food, and other people would bring things, and he would just look at me and he'd say, bless you, and he would take my hands, and there was just like this incredible gratitude for that kind of help and love. And I think that gratitude that he had for others helping was a very soft, sweet part that I'm really glad I got to experience. So I'm going to make this short because I know there's a lot coming up, but just to follow up on one thing with the pizza. Michael and I, when we were talking, we knew that we had to have pizza at this celebration. So we're hoping that the pizza will actually be delivered. We think it will be, and it's not going to be New York pizza, but it will be a tribute to Bert.
Where's it from?
Don't ask.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Leidenfrost. I'm a farmer that lives down the road here. I was probably one of the few people that Bert met here when he first came here. I've lived here most of my life. He moved here in 1965, and he came here to actually be with Anthony Damiani, who was his lifelong friend. They were friends in Brooklyn. He's one of two people that I know of that were students of Paul Brunton. The rest of us are students of Anthony, not Paul Brunton. And I think that's a very good distinction to make. Most of us treated Bert in a very gingerly way because he was so happy-go-lucky and so just wonderful. But I'd rather not talk about myself. I'd rather like to talk about my friend here. He took me in when I was here alone, basically. Only, of course, I had been with Anthony, but I became very close friends to Bert. He invited me into his house, and along with his wife, we became basically lifelong friends at the time. His generosity, his gentleman-like attitude. He was a perfect gentleman, probably better than anyone I have ever met in my life. he had a kind of gentility about him. Without being effeminate, he was gracious and just very just had a very happy, open, very sincere life attitude towards everyone and to life itself. He was a very positive person, somewhat of an idealist in his manner. He always took the high road, morally high road, much to the dismay of a lot of people when they get into a talk with him. He would always take the highest standpoint ever. Many of us would be concerned about all of the little details at the bottom, but he really wanted to know about the one and the over self at any rate, he made a great effect on my life at the time. I was only like about 22 years old, and I had never met a man of this character before. He was so gentle and wonderful, and I learned to love him very much, and I still do. I can't say much more.
Well, before David speaks, I would like to say, well, I don't want to interfere with your talk, but I always refer to David as Saint David. Because to put up with my father for so many years, I mean, I don't know how he did it. It tested my patience, and I had none, and it tested my anger, which there was plenty of, and frustration. And David lived there day in and day out and helped my father, and I'd just like to say thank you.
Well, I need no introduction now because I got one. Let's see. I've known Bert since about 1970. I met him at the bookstore. I actually connected with him in an odd way in about the spring of 1970. There were classes going on at the bookstore, I think 3 or 4 nights a week, and I came into the middle of one night because I had to take a friend to the airport. And there was something going on there that was different than everything that had ever been there before, which was some kind of drama, psychology thing that was going on for a while. And so it ended, and that night I had a big dream, which was actually one of 3 that I've ever had. And I went in the next day to talk to Tony about it, and he was Tony then. And Tony said, well, let's wait and we'll deal with this in class later. Okay, if you say so. And after meditation, Tony split. He took right off. And so the class, which normally was a class on, I think, astrology, was supposed to be that night, was this psychodrama thing that was going on. And somehow it became my turn, and I was the focal point of the whole thing for, I don't know, 20 minutes or half an hour, something like that. And at one point, I glanced over and I saw Bert, and he was getting angry. And that pushed a button in me, and the whole class ended very early, about 10 minutes after that. So there was always some kind of connection that I had with Bert, and I didn't really understand it. We used to go after his job at the college spa and go have pizza. They always said it, I don't know, you guys remember,
was it the Roma Pizzeria?
Yeah.
Yeah, we go there and he'd walk in and everybody behind the counter go, "Hey, Profess," you know. We'd get a pizza, so forth. One night he actually let me play with him, which was astounding because I knew my way around an electric bass, but I'd never played an upright, you know, double bass. But I faked it, and he didn't mind. So, and I was as good as the guy that was there. Didn't matter. I was always very impressed with Bert. Obviously, everything that's already been said in terms of his general nature and so forth. But a couple of things I remember, just personally, I was somewhere in the mid-'70s or late '70s, I was driving down County Road 2 by Bert's house, or I was coming up that way, and I saw Bert on the second story of his house on a ladder, and I said to myself, what is a cultured, sophisticated man from New York City doing up on a ladder? Well, it turns out he was painting his house, which is a kind of a normal thing to do if you're, you know, grew up in the country around here, but he was up there painting a house just like anybody else. I was amazed. Well, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, Michael and Deborah asked if I would move in. Bert was living by himself then, so I rented a room for Bert for a while, and I learned an awful lot about Bert. A couple of years before COVID, we talked a lot, and you know, in addition to his obvious piano skills, which everybody who was fortunate enough to see them knows about, he was brilliant. He actually skipped 2 grades. He got out of high school when he was 16 and then started going to Juilliard. His mother, who was a formidable person, I remember meeting her once, was incredibly supportive of Bert and his musical ability, to the point where that Steinway that Michael was referring to, that was purchased in the middle of the Depression, right? And she went out and borrowed money from half a dozen people to be able to afford it for Bert, and was just very, very, very much supportive of that part of Bert's life. A couple other things I learned. You know, he came up here in the mid-'60s to rejoin his friend Anthony Damiani, who had moved up here with his family to get away from the city. And we were talking one day about it. And the story that Bert told me was, he said, I came up to visit, and I thought, well, I wonder if I could move up here. I better see about teaching music. So I went to the college, didn't know a thing about teaching academic music, but walked in and had a meeting with the dean and said, do you need any piano players? He said, well, in the first place, you need to get a master's. He had a bachelor's from Juilliard at that point. So he said, a master's in what? He said, in education at the New York State Law. So Bert went back to New York, and Columbia University had a program with Juilliard where any Juilliard graduate could get a ME, is it? I guess, a master's in education. So he did that and moved up here. Now, the reason I'm prefacing all of this is when he moved up here, the pay for a elementary or high school or middle school teacher was about $6,000, okay? Between 6 and 7, maybe 65, I don't know, somewhere there. Bert was making 25 grand a year in New York at the time. So the depth of his love for his friend Tony, was so strong that he was willing to sacrifice that to come up there. There are a lot of other stories I could tell, but I think I'm going to just say Michael and Deborah asked me to live with him for a while. And I learned a lot about Bert, a little bit about myself. And all I can really say, that in the years before and the last 7 years, unlike myself and many people that I've met over the years, I never heard Bert utter a single unkind word about anybody.
Okay, so, let's see what time it is. Well, if anybody would like to add some comments, some memories, it's open mic time.
Mike, John had mentioned that Bert studied directly with PB. Can you comment more on that?
Well, I think it was just meaning that that's how he got involved in the whole, yeah, initially from, well, the two, yeah.
Talking to them.
Yeah, Charlene.
I can talk loud. When we would go into the college spa, he would be singing something like, "I left my heart in San Francisco." And a bunch of us were students, and we walked in together. And he would look up, and he would stop playing that, and he would start to play Debussy, Claire de Lune for us, which was such a gift. Thank you.
Michael, I'd like to share a memory or two. No, I can speak loud. I have a big mouth. So, two memories with Bert, and I was talking with Michael a little while ago, and he had the same memory, but I didn't remember him there.
Say who you are, Lee.
Lou Damiani, Stephen's brother, Anthony's son. But when I was about 7, Michael would have been 9, our parents took us to a theater in Watkins Glen, and we saw La Boheme. And when Mimi died, which she died every time in the opera, she never got out of it alive, I just remember sobbing all the way home. I didn't remember Michael there or Paul there. I just remember Bert and my father and La Boheme. And so anytime after the rest of my life, whenever I'd walk into a room, he would start playing La Boheme. And it was just very beautiful, very beautiful. Now, I might be the only one here, maybe Jerry, who had Bert for music class in 7th and 8th grade. And, I was, pretty fresh 7th and 8th grader, not really.
Very fresh.
But Bert would play all this stuff, and he knew that I had listened to this at home. So one day in the middle of, it never left me, this question, and I still wrestle with it. He says to me, stops the music, he says, okay, he was playing Beethoven's 3rd or 5th, I forget which, on the phonograph. And he said, so, Lou, did Beethoven 3rd come from the world idea, or did Beethoven's 3rd help produce the world idea? And, I've had to wrestle with that question to this day. But, his 7th and 8th grade class was just, unbelievable. So many memories of Bert. Deborah and I were born 57, same year. So many memories, and everything that was said and shared today, and he was a beautiful man, and thank you.
Thank you.
This is the text to the song that you're going to hear. It's a translation of a Rooker poem. I am lost to the world with which I used to waste much time. It has for so long known nothing of me. It may well believe that I am dead. Nor am I at all concerned if it should think that I'm dead. Nor can I deny it. For truly, I am dead to the world. I am dead to the world's tumult and rest in a quiet realm. I live alone in my heaven, in my love, in my song.
I always felt very lucky to have been born in a family of artists. My mother is a dancer, my father is a lighting designer, my sister is a cook, which is definitely a form of art in France. My uncle is a pianist, my grandmother was a painter, and I became a pianist just like my grandpa. But I am not a professional pianist. What I prefer to do is to teach. So I became a piano teacher. And when I got asked, why do I like to teach? I remembered a summer in the United States when I was 16, and my grandpa offering me to teach me how to play the second movement of the 8th Beethoven Sonata. So he taught me on his beautiful piano with his statue of Ludwig van watching us. Now, whenever I play something by Beethoven, I remember my grandpa. In French we say, words spoken fly, words written stay. I believe music stays too in our ears and in our hearts. So here is for you, and in honor of Bert Salmirs, the second movement of Beethoven 8th Sonata.
Hello, friends and family. For those who don't know me, I'm Raphael, Bert Salmirs' older granddaughter. Some of you might saw me when I was a child, so if you don't recognize me, here I am. Thank you for being there to honor my grandfather. I really wish I was there, but this is what it is, you know. So here we are on the screen. It's not a very easy exercise for me to speak on the screen, but anyway, I would like to take the chance to say some words to my grandfather, and I really thank you for you to listen for these words, and I hope Grandpa, you might hear some of it. So anyway, here it is. Dear Grandpa, it's been a while. The last years, we didn't have the chance to see a lot of each other. My adult life didn't give me the opportunity to come as much as I wanted. As a child, coming to your home was such a special moment. I remember the smells, I remember Grandma's beautiful garden and food, and I remember you playing the piano, listening to your music. I remember your office and the time you taught me how to play Pocahontas on your piano. These were very special moments. Watching you play at home on your or on stage was always a great deal, and I was so proud to have such a talented grandpa. I miss you. I miss these moments. But I thank you for them. They will always be in my heart. If you can, say hello to Grandma. I really miss her. Let's meet again. Until then, I will keep a place for you in my heart, as I did for Grandma, and I keep making you live in my memories. As we say in French, bon voyage, and try not to forget about me. I know we didn't say this a lot to each other, because we're kind of made in the same wood. I don't know if this is an English expression, but we say that in French to say we look a lot alike. And we might be a little bit shy on our feelings, so here it is. So we didn't say that a lot to each other, but I really love you, and goodbye. Thank you for listening to me. Sorry for the crying, it's not easy to say all of that. I'm not, I did record this maybe 10 times before I sent it to you, so sorry, I'm not a great actor. Thank you again, and big kiss, and I'm here with you in my heart. Bye.
I cannot talk about the place my father holds in my life without talking about his relationship with my mother. Dad was fascinated by the East and Mom by the West. They sort of met halfway. My father, the intellectual artist from New York, and my mother, the adventurous Japanese woman. He said that when he was stationed in Japan, before going there, he knew he was going to come home with a Japanese wife. My mother told me that when she was young, she dreamt of meeting a man who always had a book under his arm. Mission accomplished. So I'm the product of two parents, both deeply rooted in their culture, but willing to break with tradition and family, either emotionally or geographically. I later did the same thing. I did both. Our home was clean, uncluttered, organized, harmonious. There were rarely any clashes or crises. We never felt rushed. I remember visiting one summer with my 14-year-old daughter and her friend. The moment the friend walked into the entranceway of our house, she looked at Raphael and said, "Are we in the home of noble people?" She was not used to a house where not everything had some sort of utility. She saw that things were placed specifically in certain places because that was their place. But in this life of smooth sailing, there were just these blotches of colors. The flowers surrounding our house, my mother's painting, and music, always music, non-stop music. Beethoven, Wagner, Rachmaninoff, Mahler, Puccini. Not the most austere music, just unabashed emotionality in our perfectly arranged house. Another type of harmony. I don't think I discovered Baroque music until I left home and entered the world of contemporary dance. In our house, we sat quietly, seemingly calm, but we were transperced with a turmoil of wild, uncontained, contrasting beauty. It all seemed so normal to us. I knew that my friends did not have a group of colorful, long-haired hippies who showed up to their house to eat vegetarian lasagna, listen to music, and discuss philosophy. Yes, we were different. Imagine the late 60s in Hector, Burdett, Watkins Glen. City people, mixed marriage. Were those two new kids Chinese? After a while, they realized we weren't going to church on Sunday. They figured it was because we were Jewish. Being different became my identity in this very conformist society. Dad upset norms also by playing the piano at the Watkins Townhouse after teaching school, in a period where teachers were not to be seen drinking, or even being in a place that served alcohol. Many of his colleagues came anyway, maybe feeling a little bit of revolt, but definitely enjoying the music and in full approbation of the ambiance of this place. He was also the first teacher to have a beard, in a period where having a beard was just counterculture, leaning dangerously towards Marxism. I remember the local newspaper wrote an article, an amusing article about this new fad. He mentioned honorable bearded men. Abraham Lincoln, Santa Claus, Bert Salmirs. I was proud of my father, his intelligence, his artistry, his role as a local star. Marriage dates got changed to be sure that he could play. I remember all of you coming to the college spa to cool out with the Bert Sal trio, eating Greek spaghetti, and smoothing over those philosophical knots after your class at the bookstore. Yes, I admired him until I arrived at that eye-rolling teen years. I remember Mark Twain said, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could barely stand to be in the same room with him. When I was 21, I was amazed at the progress he had made in 7 years." So, who was my father? That idealized, perfect father of my childhood, who too quickly became Mark Twain's ignorant man, then a fellow adult who met and had long discussions of contrasting opinions on art and the world in general, but how he loved our verbal jousts. Later I was surprised and moved by the strength he showed during my mother's illness. Taking care of her for all those last months, never leaving the house, not even going upstairs to sleep. He would sleep on the armchair next to her bed. "This is what people do," he said. There was just no question for him. This period was followed by an old man learning to live with loneliness, and by an even older man learning to deal with the solitude of COVID. At this point, I was so relieved that Michael lived nearby, and forever grateful for David's presence. Gratitude to both of you. And then the last years, watching him become more and more diminished. I would come every year to take care of him. Relieved that he still recognized me. Learning to replace irritation with patience. Not easy. Learning to just give love when he didn't seem able to return it. Those were my father's last lessons. Happy journey, Dad. Until we meet again.